Okay, so this is part 2 of the MIP 410 Legend Restoration project. So basically what I did was start with the front end here to get the works shock tower to be compatible with the gearbox, the front gearbox. So the way the front gearbox had mounted on the original shock tower, so this is the MIP tower that comes with the 410 Legend kit, is that there's a little notch in here with these two holes on either side. And you can see these little sort of ears extending around the front gearbox, and that basically mounts over on the front of the shock tower, and then you just take some 440 screws, some rather short ones, and you just screw them in through the shock tower, and that's it. That's the only thing that holds this gearbox in place. This is very different from the SP1 and SP2 four-wheel drive conversions, the earlier MIP conversions, which basically you had to drill some holes through the nose plate, I believe, and secure the gearbox that way. So this is a very different setup here. So the way that I was able to get this to fit on the World's Tower was basically a Dremel and a lot of sanding and grinding. So the World's Tower itself, I wish I had another one to show you as a reference, but basically it does not fit this to start with. The little notch opening here is very narrow, and so you have to widen that out, and you also have to widen out some of the space here and grind out some of the space here. So a lot of carbon fiber you have to grind out or sand out just to make space for the pulley, to make sure the pulley doesn't rub against the shock tower, and to make sure that the gearbox slots right in. So the way I started to do that was I basically took this shock tower and I mounted it to this shock tower using, I think, either these bottom two holes or these middle holes here, one of those, I can't remember. And those holes align, and I just took some screws and I screwed them in just to lock them in place over each other so it's perfect alignment. And then I just traced out this opening here to give me an idea of how much extra material I'd have to remove from the front tower. And I started with that. And of course, I also did that to line up for, how to drill, where exactly to drill these two holes. I drilled those with a 2.5mm drill bit. I did that, I think that's a little bit smaller than a 440 thread, but I did that on purpose so that the screw, when I screw it in, it actually threads in there and tightens up. But in any case, I use this as a template for just tracing out how much extra material I'd have to remove from the bottom of the front tower. And then from that point, I just did trial and error, grind a little bit out here, a little bit out there, do some test fitting, just to see, how much extra I'd have to remove to get this to fit. So I am pleased to say that it does fit, although if I did ever have to remove this front pulley to service it, it would not be as straightforward as just pulling this pulley out. I'd have to undo these two screws, pull the gearbox out, and then pull the pulley out. So it seems to work okay. In order to facilitate the rest of the build, I had to mount the belt early because otherwise there's no way to actually get the belt in there through the tower. So I figured I'd just mount it early on the front tower. And this belt, I actually ordered two of them. It's from Polybelt, and it is a 3mm pitch, 633mm total circumference or length, and it's a 4mm wide belt. So this is almost exactly the same belt that you would have in the SC10 4x4. The only difference is that the SC10 4x4 belt is, I think, 5mm wide, 5 or 6, something like that. This is 4mm wide, and it just barely fits inside the pulley there. So the reason I went to this belt over the stock belt, which is a little bit shorter, I think maybe 10 or 12mm shorter, something like that, is because this, when you do the World's front end, you're basically putting an RC10T front end on an RC10, and that makes the car longer. And so you need a longer belt to accommodate that extra length. So that's why I have this belt on here. So this, I think, is the hardest part of the build. The rest of it is just putting everything together. And the next sort of moderately difficult part will be setting up this guy with the slipper pads and the spring and putting this in a new gearbox and setting that all up. But for now, I'm gonna continue on with the front end build and get that going. But this is what I have so far, and it looks like you can in fact, at least provisionally, put an MIP 14 gearbox on a World's front shock tower, and it does appear to hold okay. So we'll see how the rest of the build goes, and until then, thanks for watching.